Hi, it's Katie from Katie Cooks and Crafts, and today I'm crafting, and I'm going to show you how I made these fun and colorful wooden blocks. I got it in my head that I wanted to make wooden blocks as a Christmas gift to my 16-month-old, but I wasn't exactly sure if I could do it. I don't have a ton of experience working with wood, and I haven't really made a project like this since middle school shop class. But I wanted to give it a go. I went online and I found a bunch of instructions for all the different aspects I wanted to incorporate in these blocks, and I'll put all those links in the description box so you can check them out for yourself. These blocks are super simple and basic, but I love the way that they turned out. Like I said, I don't have a lot of experience with wood. I'm just a mom that wanted to make a toy for her little girl. So if I can do it, you can do it. And let me show you how. So this is the wood that I got. I got these at Home Depot, and these are called hobby boards, and they're just short lengths. They're usually 36 inches, and they're really nice because they are nice hardwood. They have poplar, oak, and maple, and they're already cut down into these square shapes. So this one is 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. So otherwise you'd have to get a wider board and rip cut it to the width that you want, and rip cutting is a lot more difficult. So these are already the right width, and I would just need to do cross cuts this way to make the blocks the length that I want them. But they have these hobby boards, and they're usually around like $8 to $10 each. But these say special buy on them, and they were a little bit off to the side, and they're 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch by 32 inches, so a little bit shorter. But these ones were only $2.25 each, so I picked up 2 of these. I think that will be plenty for the small number of blocks that I want to make. And then I picked up this dowel rod. This is a 1.25 inch red oak dowel rod, and they have cheaper dowel rods made out of another material. I'm not exactly sure what the wood is, but I thought that the red oak would be nice. But after I got it, I kind of not sure if I'm going to use it. I'm not sure how easy it is to cut dowel rod with the saw, and how easy it's going to be to sand it down. So I might just return that and stick with the square, the cubes and the rectangle blocks for now. But what I did is I measured this, and when you buy lumber, if you buy like a 2x4, it's not actually 2 inches by 4 inches. It's 1 7/8 by 3 3/4 or something like that, with 3 7/8. But I did measure this, and these are right at 1.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off with my pencil here the lengths that I want these blocks. So I'm going to make a bunch that are cubes, so that would be 1.5 inches long. And then I'm going to make some that are 3 inches long, so more rectangles. Then I might make a few that are like 4 inches long, just so there's a different variety of sizes. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark these off with pencil, and then I'm going to take them to my dad's house, and he's going to help me cut them with his saw. Okay, so I marked these off, and what I have right now, if you can see the pencil marks, I made 12 of these cubes, and then I did 6 of the 3-inch blocks, and I have 3 of the 4-inch blocks for now, and I have about 1.5 feet left that I haven't marked, and I'm just going to leave that for now in case something happens and one of these other ones that have already been marked gets damaged or something happens to it. I'll have that excess that we can mark and cut at that time. So I'll take these over to my dad's house, and he's going to help me cut them up. So here are all my blocks cut, and I sort of wasted my time by marking all of my cut lines all at once, because something I forgot to take into account is the width of the saw blade. As the saw blade goes through the wood, it will shave a small amount of the wood off as it goes through. And you know, over the cumulative effect of like 10 or 15 blocks, it makes a pretty big difference. So I just started from scratch. I measured, marked my line, and then cut one cube, and then I started again, measured, marked, and cut, you know, my second cube, and I did that. I also used, my dad had a carpenter square, which made it a lot easier to get a nice 90-degree angle. So if you can get your hands on that tool, that would be helpful. So in the end, I got 6 of these 3-inch cubes and 4 of the 4-inch cubes. I did a 4th one. I thought it would be nice to have, you know, 4 corners if she wanted to build a house or something. And then 12 of the cubes. So I think that's a pretty good beginner set. My next step is to sand all these blocks. I need to remove the pencil marks, and some of the edges, the cut edges, are a little bit splintered and a little bit rough. And I I also want to blunt these corners, the points, and the sides of the corners. So this one I just kind of gave a once over with 100 grit sandpaper. This one had pretty nice smooth cut edges, so this was really easy to just kind of polish up a little bit. For these ones, it's a little bit rougher cut. You can see I need to probably get some like 60 grit coarse sandpaper or something like that to start these out, but I'm pretty happy with these. I'm not sure how blunt I want to go with these corners, just trying to make them a little bit baby safe, but that is my next task, is sanding all these. And I'm just sanding them by hand with sandpaper. If you had a sander tool, I'm sure that would make it a lot easier, but I'm just kind of using what I got. So let me work on that, and I'll show you what they look like when I'm done. So here are my blocks all sanded and ready to go. And I'm not gonna lie, this wasn't the most fun part of the process. I had to sand them all by hand. And I will say that it helps to have quality sandpaper. The first sandpaper I had was kind of a value pack, and it wasn't doing a very good job. So I got some better sandpaper, some coarser sandpaper. I started with the 80 grit. That really helped take down the points and the sides here. And then I moved to 100 grit, 150 grit, and then finally 220 grit. And I didn't want them like perfectly glass smooth, so I didn't really worry too much about making them perfectly smooth. I just wanted them uniform and no splinters, of course, blunt the edges and smooth over the cut edges. So I think that a little bit of texture is nice, feels nice in the hand, help the baby grip the block, and I think it'll help the wood accept the dye a little bit better. So you could leave them just like this as natural wood, or you can condition the wood with some oil or wax or something. But I wanted color on mine and I didn't want to paint mine, so I looked online for some ideas on how to dye the wood or stain the wood. And one thing that I saw was to use liquid watercolor, but the liquid watercolor at the craft store near my house did not say non-toxic, so it has to be non-toxic, of course. So another idea I saw online was to use food coloring, and you can see I have some on my fingers. I did a little test run with some of the scrap wood, but basically most of the directions are pretty similar. You just dilute some food coloring with a little bit of water, and you can brush it on the wood or dip it and dunk it in the wood or soak it in the wood. I also saw one instructions that said to use alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, and I really like this idea over the water because the alcohol will evaporate away a lot faster than the water, so these will dry a lot faster. I can do a second coat a lot sooner, and also because the alcohol will evaporate away, the wood is less likely to be damaged by water. So I'm gonna do these directions. The directions for coloring the wood using this alcohol, where I got this idea, I'll link that down below so you can read it for yourself. But what they said is to use 1 tablespoon of this alcohol and to tint it with 10 or more drops of food coloring. And so I want to make these as colorful as possible. So I have 22 blocks here, and ideally I would like to have 22 different shades of color, so they're all completely different. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do that, but I'm gonna try. And I don't want to have like 22 different color little cups of color to do this. So what I'm gonna try, I'm gonna attempt this and hopefully it works, is I'm going to start with one solid color like yellow. I'm gonna dunk one in the yellow, and that will be the yellow block. And then I'll slowly add drops of either the red or the blue or the green so that it slowly changes from the yellow to the green. And that way I'm not, ending up with 22 different cups of color. So I'm not sure if these colors might end up a little murky if I start mixing a little bit too many shades. So I might have to repeat colors, I'm not sure yet, but I'm just gonna start with a small amount here. So 1 tablespoon of the alcohol, and I'll start with the yellow, and I'll do 10 drops of the yellow. All right. And I'm going to give that a little stir. I'm using Q-tips. I don't have a bunch of paintbrushes, so I'm just going to use Q-tips. And give that a stir, and then I don't know if I'm going to brush this on or dunk it. I did some practice runs with some scrap wood and I just dunked them, but I think I might just do this and try to get a more uniform color. Okay, so I'm gonna just set this aside. I have my work surface covered here with wax paper so it can just sit there and dry. I'm gonna set the yellow aside and I'm gonna make a batch of, I guess, red. Don't know if the camera is picking up how vivid the colors are. They're turning out very saturated just with one coat. And I think the colors will lighten as they dry. But I'm very happy with how they look so far. They're very pretty. So next I will do, I guess, blue. Okay, so now this is straight green. Okay, so now I have one block of each of those solid colors, so now I'm going to start mixing my colors a little bit. So I think I'm just going to mix a little bit of green in with the blue and get sort of a teal color. So I'll just put some of this in here. Stir it around. And see what it looks like. So you can see how the colors very slightly different, but enough of a difference. So now I have all my blocks colored and I'm really happy with the way they turned out. This was actually a lot of fun. I did the first blocks with just the one color, and then I sort of mixed two colors together to get kind of in between those shades, and then after that I just kind of mixed everything together. You can see here in the container I have blue and I added green, and I was just like using this Q-tip, picking up some blue, putting it on the block, then dipping it in the green and putting it on the block, and they're all different shades, and some of them you can kind of see the two different colors depending on how the wood was picking it up. So I think they're really cool. One thing I will say is it's probably best to start with the light colors, because some of the colors as I mixed them together were getting a little muddy or murky colored, and what I was doing for those blocks is just making them a darker color to kind of hide that. So like this one, I was doing green and yellow together and it was starting to look like kind of muted olive green, and I didn't like that. So I just added a bunch of red and it turned out orange. So if you start light, you can always make them darker. And also my hands, you can see some of this dark color was transferring to the lighter block. So if you start light and go dark, then you have a less chance of that transferring. But I guess I could have worn gloves, but that's not how I roll. So I'm gonna let these blocks dry overnight, clean up my mess here, and I'll show you what they look like in the morning. Here we are the next day, and the blocks are all dry, and some of them came out really bright and vivid and uniform, and some of them came out a little bit less uniform. And I think part of that's just the way that the wood accepts the dye, and I think probably also it's partially how I applied the dye. But I'm not going to stress too much about it. I wish they were a little bit more uniform, but what are you going to do? I'm going to press forward. One thing I did want to check to see how much the dye transferred from the blocks, and if you rub it with like a white cloth, the dye transfers, and if you get them wet, the dye transfers quite a bit. So what I ended up doing was I started with these two, and I just run water over them and just rinse them under the faucet, and you can see how much lighter the colors are. And it's a lighter shade of color, but they're still very colorful. And I would rather the color come off now in sort of a controlled fashion than to come off all over her hands and clothes and stuff like that. So I washed these and kind of rubbed them to get the excess dye out of the wood. And now that they're dry, I rub them again, and there's a little bit of color transfer if you really rub with a white cloth, but not nearly as much as before. So I'm gonna go ahead and wash all of these blocks just to get that excess dye off. So this is what the blocks look like after they were washed and dried. I just let them air dry for several hours, and you can see a lot of the color washed away, but they're still very colorful, and the color's even a little bit more even. So I did rub them with the cloth again to see how much color transferred, and it was a little bit, but not too bad. To condition the wood, I'm going to use this oil and wax mixture I made, and this is 4 parts coconut oil and 1 part beeswax, and I'll put the link to the recipe in the description box. But I just put this in the microwave for about 2 minutes and melted it down, and then I stirred it as it cooled, and it made this really thick paste. It's kind of thick, but the heat from your hands will start to melt it, and I'm just going to rub it into the wood, working it in. The oil is going to absorb into the wood, and then the wax is going to lay on the surface to help keep the wood from drying out further. So I'm just going to rub a thin layer all over all of the blocks. Okay, so these blocks have been sitting here for about 4 hours with the oil wax mixture on them, and now I'm just going to take this is just an old rag, an old washcloth, and I'm just going to wipe them to get the excess off and to sort of buff them, polish them up a little bit. You can see there's still a little bit of color transfer, but it's nothing compared to what it was before. I'm really scrubbing vigorously, and that's how much, I don't know if you can see, that's how much color transfer there is. So I really think that washing them was a good idea. And the washing them kind of lightened the color, but putting this oil wax mixture has kind of deepened the color, so they kind of canceled out. And I still think they're really pretty. So I just need to clean these all up, and then I'm going to let them dry overnight just to make sure they're fully dry, and then they'll be ready to wrap up for Christmas. So here are my finished blocks, and I'm really happy with the way that they turned out. I mean, I know they're not perfect, but I feel like every time I make a project like this where I kind of reach outside of my comfort zone, I get about halfway done and I think, ugh, these are not going to turn out. And but in the end, these turned out, I think, really nice, and I think my little girl is going to have a lot of fun with them. So I hope you like this video and this project. If you found this video because you're making blocks yourself, leave some comments down below. I'd love to hear what you're making your blocks out of, or you know, the dimensions you're using, or if you're putting color or painting on them. I had so much fun making these blocks, and I'd love to hear about your blocks too. So until next time, thank you so much for watching.